Welcome to the Pure Wellness Podcast, where we talk about what it takes to live a holistic lifestyle by making conscious, healthier choices. Our hope is that these discussions will inspire you to strengthen your daily practice to improve overall physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being. Pure Wellness Podcast provides information solely for educational purposes and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I'm your host, Johanna Altman, founder of One Body Medicine, avid health enthusiast, and mother of three. Join me and industry professionals as we explore human potential in the pursuit of pure wellness. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me at the Pure Wellness Podcast. Today is the fourth and final episode of my mold journey. Could you believe it? I can't believe it. In this episode, we'll be going through how we ended up choosing the remediation company we did, the process of the remediation, and some lessons that we learned along the way. With me today, I have Rusty Tweed of Mold Zero. Rusty, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so excited to share with everybody and give people more information on our remediation process and kind of pick your brain a little bit more about just mold and how we need to get rid of it and what is a real remediation look like and the steps and processes. So thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Glad to do it.
Yeah. So I want to start by asking you, because this is such a specialized field, right?
Right.
How did you get into this? I believe your background is in engineering, correct?
Yeah, I mean, way back when I took engineering. I'm originally from Canada, actually, and I took engineering back there, and truthfully, most of my career I've done real estate stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
And then, but what happened? How I got into this business is that we bought a beautiful old home in Glendale that we loved. And after being there for several years, my wife had this recurring things happen, headaches. She had asthma before, but it got worse. At one point, she was actually bedridden quite a bit. Oh, wow.
Yeah, and how long after you guys moved into the home did her symptoms of, being asthmatic and then bedridden happen?
Yeah, it wasn't like immediate that we realized it, it was over several years. And then it was several more years trying to figure out what was going on. Mm-hmm. And eventually my wife had she went to a functional doctor actually, and they suggested having a mold test done in her home. Mm-hmm. And we knew nothing about mold because it came in, well, she had a mold test personally, and it came up that she had mold in her blood first. Mm-hmm. And then so we said, okay, well, we better test our house because it's coming from somewhere. It doesn't just show up in your body out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And so we had our house tested, and we were shocked. It was very high, like ridiculously high. And then we're like, what do we do? We have an old home, and when you're familiar with homes, so they're older, they're plaster. Yeah. And so it's hard to take them apart to figure out what's where. Yeah. I went through the whole thing of trying to figure out where the moisture was coming from. And it was just this whole process of figuring out what do we do? And we debated, well, if at one point we actually decided we were just going to sell it because we didn't want to go through what it was going to take. But then we realized wherever you move to, you still have to do now the process because now you have awareness that this is a possibility. But So what you're saying is you guys had no visible signs of mold, which was very similar. Correct.
To our story.
Yep.
So where do you look?
Yeah. And that's, again, over the years, I've had, I've learned a lot. In fact, we talked about it. I've just recently finished my book. And so I put a lot of examples in there.
Which I love, by the way.
Oh, good. And I did a very extensive checklist for a homeowner to go through and check the different areas of their home. Because, well, in our home, okay, I'll give you an example. When it's an older home like that, you don't know what's happened all those years before you owned it.
Yeah, all the history and all the...
I mean, I guarantee you there's been a roof leak or there's been a overflowed toilet or, something has happened over the years. And in our home, we had a recurring leak in the roof. And then what's funny about California is people, I don't think, appreciate leaks and things like they do in other areas. Now, we also have a location in Florida, and I've spent a lot of time out there, and it's a whole different world. We'll talk about that.
Well, we will, because that's one of the things that really drew me and Matt to picking your company was the fact that you guys were both licensed in California. Not as impressive as being licensed in a state like Florida, where you're dealing with humidity, constant tornadoes, water issues, groundwater.
Correct.
So we'll get into that.
You're inundated with water and humidity constantly.
100%.
And I pulled it up and I put this in my book that, you get over 50 inches a year average in Florida of rain versus California. You're lucky to get 12 inches.
Yeah. And there are droughts even every few years.
Correct.
So we don't think about mold.
And that's when you get the rain, and you're right. So people don't think about it because, and I knew in our case, we had a spot that was leaking but then it doesn't rain for another year. So you're like, who cares? Right.
Yeah.
Whereas in Florida, you see a spot like that. You're like, hey man, we're going to be at deluge next week. We better get that fixed really quick. So people are much more on the ball getting that kind of stuff taken care of in Florida than you would here in California.
Makes sense.
And also people are kind of drilled into them. California's a desert.
That's true.
And people, but what they don't understand is who cares what's outside the home? It's what's inside the home that makes the difference. And so, look, everybody's had some kind of leak, right? You've had like I said, toilet overflow or a leaky pipe somewhere under the sink. I mean, it's happened to everybody, and you don't know what the history is. And the problem is, and this is the problem in our home, is that it had leaked and gone behind the walls, and it sits back there. And the behind your wall doesn't get circulation. I mean, I tell a story. We've actually opened up walls 6 months after it's rained, and it's still wet.
I believe that.
And so it's a perfect environment for mold, but it's totally out of sight, out of mind. The other thing I found in our home, well, we had a leaky shower pan in the second floor, and so the water had dripped.
So it was between the first and the second floor.
Correct. So in that space in between the two floors, the floor and the ceiling, there was mold. We have, unusual for California, but we have a basement, and then we also have a crawl space part of the home. So I ended up going back in the crawl space because I'd never ever been in there.
Who goes in the crawl space anyways?
Exactly. It's the last place I want to go. Anyway, I go back there, and there's a hose that comes off of the air conditioning system that drains any kind of overflow condensation from your HVAC system. And that pipe or that hose actually had come disconnected and wasn't draining outside. So there was a puddle.
That was just constantly
there. And
it
had probably been there for years. And there was this big patch of mold about half the size of this table, just sitting there on the ground.
That's scary.
Yeah, it was like this fuzzy mold growing there, like, oh my God. And like I said, it could have been there for 20 years. I don't know. So there's all these little things that happen, and you have to really know the history of the home and investigate and look for these things. And again, in California, people just don't think about it the way you do in an area that has a lot of rain all the time. And
Agree.
it's 90% of it's hidden out of the way, and people just don't realize it's there.
Well, I love that you got into this business because you had a need and you didn't want to leave it up to anybody else. And because you had history in real estate with homes, not to mention you have an engineering background, you're very detail oriented, and your wife was sick. So I love that is where you guys were coming from, because I will tell you from our experience, the same thing happened in the sense that we had no idea where to look. We had that amazing inspection from We Inspect.
Right.
Handed you the 650 some pages because I didn't know where to start. And you and Dan from Masters of Moisture came, and what I really appreciated was it's very rare nowadays when work needs to get done. I have projects around this property, other properties, where we see the contractors as much as we have seen you guys. And that to me felt very comforting, because the other two companies that came and gave us a quote for the remediation for our home, one had never even seen the home. They went off of this We Inspect report, and the number and the cost of that remediation was so insane that I thought to myself, wow, like, how could this company give us a report without even seeing the home, without shaking my hand? This is a, emotional process. My husband's sick. And then the other company, the second company that came in 1.5 times the cost, showed up 1 time. And both companies, which I think is very important that we share with the viewers, they came and gave us a quote for the remediation, but both of them never addressed any drainage issues, which was the main source. We have a few sources of and we'll talk about that, of what caused the mold in our particular home.
Right.
But out of those 2 companies, if I didn't go off of my intuition and which I did go off my intuition because I just didn't feel right. I didn't feel comfortable. I could have been one of the homeowners that went with them, had my home remediated, and then the main problem was the drainage, because I have a lot of groundwater, which we'll talk about from your book, coming down the hillside in and underneath our crawl space, which is what's causing all the mold growth to kind of circulate, go up the foundational piers of the wall, into my HVAC system and into every space of the home. So you guys really addressed that and said, Johanna, we want to figure out the source. I remember I kept saying, Rusty, how much is the remediation? You said, you know what? I don't know. We need to find out where this is coming from. So that was the main difference. And I think for people watching this podcast, if I can drill anything home as a homeowner, and having watched you and Dan do this process with me, it's don't just remediate the home. Okay, let's figure out where the source is, because we can spend thousands and thousands of dollars remediating a space only to find out and to be disappointed later on that it's back again.
Yeah. Well, I can't tell you how many times we've been called in because someone already had remediation, and 6 months later or years later, they're kind of back to square one.
And that's the saddest thing that I can think of, but we don't have this education.
Right.
You guys are doing things differently.
Right. Yeah. And it's a combination of education ourselves, and then also experience and just running into situations, well, kind of back to what we were talking about Florida. So, Florida is a whole different world. Like you said, there's moisture everywhere. And if you remember Hurricane Ian, which happened back in 22. So I went there and spent most of the year there working with the crews, and I learned a lot. And now in Florida, you have to have a protocol done by a mold assessor.
Okay, so it's different than in California, because now you have an independent company that's having to come in.
Correct. And so just to explain what it is, in Florida, you have to be licensed. There is no licensing requirement in California.
Isn't that crazy? And I've discussed this on the podcast.
I listened to that. And
that is insane.
Well, a little bit of background on that.
Okay, shed some light.
In fact, Dan, just to talk about that for a minute, Dan actually did some research on it.
Okay.
And found out that California years ago, we're talking about I think it was over 20 years ago, actually had a committee, and they put together a whole plan to implement licensing in California.
Okay.
And there was a whole specific layout what to do. Mm-hmm. Nobody funded it.
Oh.
Yeah. But in Florida, it's very, very strict. It's probably it wouldn't surprise me. It's probably one of the most strict places in the world. Seriously.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And so you have a mold assessor license.
Okay.
And then you have a mold remediation license, and they're separate. And you can't do both. It's one or the other.
Okay, so the checks and balances are there. So
Correct.
That's good.
And a lot of the work in Florida, because of the hurricanes, is insurance. So then you also have the insurance side of it, where they're scrutinizing every little thing. And so before we did any job in Florida, especially if it's insurance, you have a mold assessor come in. They do kind of what We Inspect does, and they give us a protocol. They will give us specific steps that we have to follow to handle the mold. So then we have to follow that. We have to document every little thing. And then they come back afterwards. The same guy that did the
assessment
pre-test comes back and does a post-test. And so we have to be on our game.
Yeah, 100%.
Because if we fail that, we got to redo it. And that's expensive and time consuming and everything else.
And you want to get it done the first time because you don't want to have to keep coming back.
But I'm telling you, there's a lot of times we don't get it done the first time.
I read some stories. Give me some examples in Florida where you followed the assessor's protocol. They came back and said, you know what, we're still testing. We're seeing that there's still mold here. And in some of the places where you've discovered.
Sure. Well, one that comes to mind right off the bat is there was a condominium we were doing, and we failed this thing at least 2 or 3 times.
Was it
and it was simple.
Was it one unit in the condo?
Well,
or was
it was like units? A townhouse. It was like a 2-story townhouse kind of unit. Anyway, and it was a simple job. They had flooding that came in through the back patio. We cleaned up the flooring and everything else. But this one bedroom just kept testing positive, and we just pulling our hair out. Finally, I realized that they had this kind of organic wallpaper.
Okay.
Right? And we thought, okay, so we peeled the wallpaper back and it was black.
Really?
It was. Since then, I'm telling people, you do not want wallpaper.
Yeah, no wallpaper. What else is it? It's no carpet.
And carpeting. Carpeting's the other problem, or rugs. Like we just did a job yesterday, actually, I was at, and the woman had a throw rug and they had a baby.
Oh
right?
My God.
And so we're that living room where the throw rug is what came up with, mold. And we couldn't find moisture. They did have moisture in the bathrooms, which we fixed, and they had the faucets fixed and everything else, and we treated all that. But it was still showing that high levels of mold in the living room. Finally realized it was the rug, And they said, "Look, we're rolling this thing up. We're going to put it in a bag, and you're going to take it and get it professionally cleaned, and then we're going to test." So things like that can really mess up.
So do you think in that instance, that rug had been cleaned and just never fully dried out?
She said it was like 6, well, in this case, it was a throw rug. And she said it was only about 6 months old, but you got a baby crawling on it all the time. And they, babies, they drool and they spit things up and they throw things around and they spill stuff.
And liquid gets on it.
It's got to be, and this is another key point that I really have to stress with people. You have to make sure that your environment stays clean.
Oh, yes.
Right? And that's another whole thing. I can't tell you how many times.
It is.
But back to kind of this thing about Florida. So we ended up having that wallpaper removed and cleaned all that up, and then it came out great. So there's a lot of things like that. An inspector may or may not know, and it was not obvious at all.
Yeah. I want to talk about, since we're talking about organic material and wallpaper and carpet, in your book, you do a very good job of explaining what mold is and why it loves this organic material.
Right.
Can you expand more so that people can understand, if I'm in my home, what organic material am I going to be looking for? And again, that's going to address why it's so important that we keep the house clean. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and a good point. So why do we have mold in the first place? I love hiking. And so if you're out hiking in the woods or whatever, you see mold in an old stump of a tree, and you see it gets in leaves that have fallen and piled up. And that's the purpose of mold. It creates an enzyme, an organic material. It breaks it down, and that ends up being compost and turns into dirt, but it becomes healthy dirt because it's got all the nutrients from whatever it broke down. Yeah. So that's, and look, everybody's done that experiment in school where you take a piece of bread and you get it wet and put it on a plate and leave it overnight, and you come back the next day or two and you see mold growing on it. So mold is all over the place, and its whole purpose is to break down organic material. Mm-hmm. And so when you have organic material in your home, it's not such a great thing because you know that and again, mold needs moisture and it needs nutrition.
And there's a third ingredient you talk about in your book. What is that? It's temperature.
And the temperature makes a big difference as well. The warmer the environment is, and also, the humidity would be the moisture part also. So again, you want to keep the temperature below 72, 74 in that range. And you want to get it down, ideally it's around 68 to 70 in that range.
Okay, so and that's a perfect temperature range
correct.
For home.
Yeah. Now that might be cool for people, and a lot of people don't like spending the extra money for the air conditioning. But if it's below 74 and the humidity's low, and I tell people, look, for $10 you can get a little it's called a hygrometer, and it's got the temperature and the humidity on it. It's real simple. Just keep it on a desk somewhere, and you can kind of keep track of the humidity in your home.
Now, what is the humidity level that we want?
Well, you're lucky in California because it's generally low anyway. Now, when it was raining, it would go up to 60, 70% or more. But normally in California, you can find it's between 40 and 50, and that's perfect.
That's perfect. So just nothing above 50 is safe inside the home. Right.
But again, you want to check it. I mean, like I said, this other job I was at yesterday, they had moisture condensation all through their, it was actually an apartment. And in that case, there's, I think they left the shower. They would take long showers.
And everything would be closed. And so things would condensate. And
right.
So we need to open those bathroom windows too. That's also an easy tip. Or
just buy a simple, dehumidifier. Yeah. For like $250, you can get a really good quality dehumidifier at Lowe's or something like that, and throw it in there, and it'll totally, like, we put our humidifier in there, within an hour, all the condensation was gone. Great. So dehumidifiers are very effective. But again, for $10, you buy a little meter. You can see what it is. If you do have signs of moisture on the walls like that, or, I've done other places where literally you could see the perspiration on the wall, and we were trying to figure out what the heck that was. That case was actually similar to what we talked about with you guys. They were on a hillside, and this is another big problem that comes up in California.
Let's talk about that because it's very relevant to my home too. I want to talk about the organic material underneath my home too, because that will bring us back to that.
Yeah. And then, you're right. We should probably just finish up a little bit on the organic materials. So anything organic, and again, it comes down to, look, if you leave, I joke about this. I had my hockey equipment, in the basement. I'm from Canada, so I used to play hockey, and it got old and moldy in there.
Oh, really?
Because I hadn't cleaned my equipment. I got my shoulder pads and all that stuff, and my old hockey socks and whatever. And my wife made me throw it all out. But the point is that it's organic and it's sitting there, and there's dampness in the basement, and it got all moldy.
Was that from getting exposed to like the dirt in the basement or dust?
In that case, I think it was just sweaty gear that I threw in the bag and never
gross.
Typical guy, right? But the point is, you got to keep your environment clean. I mean, we just see it over and over and over where we go into a place and they've got stuff. In fact, there's a job I was at before I came here, and it's actually an office, and in the back of it, they're hoarding stuff. They just have stuff piled all over. And to be frank, we didn't pass the test in the back of the office. And we're trying to figure out, the only thing we can figure at this point is that, because the room that had the moisture, we nailed it. Mm-hmm. We really did. Mm-hmm. But outside of that room, there's a hallway, and there's an old carpeting in there, and you can smell it's kind of musty. And so in the end, they may have
carpet.
Yeah, exactly. In the end, they're probably going to have to pull that carpet, or at least have it professionally cleaned and dried out to really effectively handle that spot. So again, anything that's organic, carpeting, rugs.
Dust, something as simple as dust in the home. I think that's, in your book, you drilled down on saying, it's really important to constantly clean surfaces.
It is.
And, most of the dust that is in our home is comprised of dead skin, organic material, hair, follicles, things like that.
Correct.
And I think the reason why that's important is because once it's in your home, and we're going to talk about that more probably, like if somebody has water intrusion, or let's say a broken pipe in the bathroom, our focus normally is to focus on the leak in the bathroom to remediate that. And I think you do such a great job in your book of mentioning, just because the source of the leak or the water intrusion is in one room, it doesn't mean that if you remediate that one area, that you don't have to treat the whole house or the whole home, because mold spores are so tiny that once they get sucked up into the HVAC system, they are now getting carried in every room that has that air going.
Correct. Yep.
So that, when I read that, I knew that was the truth, because that is what happened in our home, right? We had the mold, the dry rotted beams that were in the attic that, with the perfect level of humidity over, I think it was over 50, closer to 60,
Right.
kind of was a perfect environment for all the mold to come out because we saw them in various beams, but not all of the beams. So, and then underneath the home, when you taught, let's go back to the groundwater and our home being at the base of a hillside and how that in California can affect homeowners like us
Right.
that are not thinking about drainage.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that. So an issue we ran into over and over and over here in California, which is very, obviously we have a lot of hillside homes here.
Yes.
And so you have one home that's maybe 3 feet or 6 feet or whatever above the home next to it. In your case, you have a home that's probably 3 or 4 feet above your level.
Yes.
And so the water's going to be coming down the hillside or the mountain, whatever it is, and it causes what's called hydrostatic pressure. And you're looking at it and you don't see water running down the hill. Now, when it rains, you see that. And so when it rains, people want to have correct drainage, right? But it only rains a few times of the year in California. What they don't realize is that under the ground, in the groundwater, there's water flowing down as well. And that comes down and it butts up against the foundation of your home and it can pool in there against there.
And keep it moist for we don't know how many months. And that's what's been happening.
It's going to be all year round.
That's what's been happening with our home.
Yeah, exactly. And then also cement is porous, so it absorbs it. And you've also got beams and things in there. And it's going to just suck that up. And that's called a capillary action, where just like when you have a tree, the tree will suck the water up. And then the same thing happens in your foundation and the beams around your home underneath it. And so that's a big issue. And then it gets the water into the ground and in the crawl space. And again, that's a feeding ground because it's got dirt and moisture and everything else. So you're going to get mold growing in there. And so it's really important to have that water drained correctly away from the foundation. And then also keep the, that whole area in the crawl space aerated correctly and dry.
Yes. So that was exactly our issue was, so for those listening who don't have a crawl space, they're in a better position, right?
Correct.
Because so post, what would you say, 1970s is when they kind of started building homes more on a slab. Was it the 1970s, 1980s, something like that?
Probably, yeah. And you'll find that homes that are, most newer homes have a slab, but there's still a lot of homes that are built with some kind of crawl space.
So if you have a crawl space like we do, it's even more important to be diligent because that water that's coming underneath the house. So what we discovered was just pulling against the foundational wall on every part of the home. So to remediate that and to fix that drainage issue, the guys had to dig a 5-foot trench essentially around everything, put a French drain to divert the water that was coming in and just to keep it away because we're not going to stop the moisture from coming down the hill, but we can divert it so that it doesn't affect it. One of the other things that Dan with Masters of Moisture did was you guys came up with a plan to put literally, I think I have 2 crawl spaces and each crawl space now has 50 mini fans. And an HMOC system, which I didn't even know these things existed.
Yeah, it's a newer technology, and it's these mini fans, and they actually get a schematic of your house underneath the house, and then Atmox is the company. They're actually out east, and they will actually design a system specifically for your home, and it'll include a fan system that will circulate correctly for that space. And every space is different. And also they'll put in a dehumidification system as well. And it's all being monitored in real time and adjusting. And then I have one of those systems actually in my attic as well. They have an attic version. And it actually monitors the humidity inside the attic versus outside and the temperature. And so it'll have the air going in or out of your attic depending on the time of day and to optimize it.
Correct. And I think we did that for our attic spaces as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I loved about it was Dan this morning texted me and was like, I have great news. And I'm like, give it to me. So apparently the outside humidity level was like in the 80s because we just had the rain. And underneath the crawl space was at 40.
Wow. That's really good.
So I felt really good about having had all of these guys here the last few months doing that work, I feel better equipped for sure for when we do have the rain. I want to talk about, I hear some people saying, because you guys, Mold Zero has a 5-step mold remediation process. Right. This is the first, in all the research that I had done prior to going with you guys, this was the first time I had actually heard about this 5-step process and get some type of education that there was a fogging system that could be incorporated into the remediation, which I thought, wow, that sounds pretty genius. Because, fog is something that can permeate into a lot of spaces that maybe we can't get to.
Right.
So I want you to take some time. I want to take some time and kind of go through the 5-step Mold Zero process and how you came up with that over the course of, working in both California and Florida. Because I love how you explain that in the book. Good.
Yeah, I will. So kind of goes back to my wife and we're trying to figure out, now that we have all this mold issue in our home, what do we do? And we were really into being health conscious and we didn't want to use toxic chemicals and there's all this different stuff that you could use, but in the end, is it going to be good for us as well? And so she stumbled on a company actually in Utah that had developed a technology for fogging. And they used a non-toxic chemical. They actually used what's called parasitic acid, which is basically hydrogen peroxide and vinegar. And if you know anything about chemistry, hydrogen peroxide and vinegar, or parasitic acid, it's acidic, so you don't want to get it on, just like hydrogen peroxide. You don't want to get it on you because it'll kind of burn your skin. But once it evaporates, it's just oxygen and hydrogen. It's absolutely harmless. It's one of the only chemicals that the EPA says is safe to dump down your drain because it literally just turns into oxygen, hydrogen. So this fogging process is amazing. So we had them literally come all the way from Utah to our home here in California to treat our home. And we had them treat a few friends that wanted it done at the same time just to see how it worked. And it worked fantastic. So that kind of sold me in, this is a great business opportunity, this technology. And so, but back then when I was first learning this, it was really promoted that you just need to do the fogging. You don't need to do anything else, right? The fog kills everything. So you don't really have to worry about removing it. Over time, and especially when you go to Florida's fogging had a bad name because guys were promoting just doing the fogging. And for a mold assessor, someone like your guy from We Inspect, that's verboten. You don't.
Yeah, that's not going to work for them.
No, it isn't. And so if you read Dr. Shoemaker's book and that he poo-poos fogging, but it's because guys were promoting just fog.
I understand.
And not doing all the other stuff. So what happens is when you do the fogging, it kills the mold, which is a good thing.
And it kills the mold on pretty much all the surfaces that this fogging material can reach.
I'll go through the different steps because we actually do 2 different foggings, okay? And so to go through the different steps now that we've learned that it's more, and this brings up another debate. There's a big debate about when you kill mold, is it still toxic?
Yes.
Because now you've killed the mold and when you do the fogging, it's called denaturing, where the mold cell basically breaks into pieces. So it can't regrow or it's dead. And so anyway, the point is that those little pieces and also the spores are now dead. And now they're going to be sitting on the surface of whatever, your table, your whatever it is. And so, a lot of guys are convinced, well, it's dead. Who cares, right? But then, according to Shoemaker and other people, that those dead pieces of mold are still mycotoxins. Yeah. They're still dangerous. Now, this is my opinion on this whole thing, okay? This is from watching and dealing with all this. I believe that there's about 20% of the population that's hypersensitive to mold. And those dead particles are going to definitely affect them. A lot of people, it's probably not going to do a lot. You know what I mean? Like I walk into a moldy area, I can sense it, I can smell it because I've been in and out of so many places inspecting or whatever. But it's not going to bother me a whole lot other than the fact that it doesn't
paralyze you. Like you're able to function.
I do a lot of things for my immune system. So my immune system's beefed up pretty good. And so, And so I feel, but I'm not going to go live in an environment like that. But if I have to go in and out of it. But the point is that there's a certain percentage of the population that they can't be exposed to any kind of mold, dead or alive.
Like your wife. You had
like
mentioned
my wife.
She would go into different places and like commercial properties, and she would smell it and would have to walk right out.
Yeah, like we go to a restaurant, we got to be careful. If we go on a trip, she checks the hotels ahead of time to make sure that they've been renovated recently or something, so that, like a lot of old hotels you go in and they're musty or whatever, and she can't stay there. We literally have to check out and go somewhere else. So she's hypersensitive.
And I think there's a consensus too in the functional world that about 20% of the population has SIRS or are hypersensitive.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about.
Their immune system's compromised and they
have that gene.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, when you're dealing with someone who is hypersensitive, you got to be clean. You got to wipe everything down.
And we have to remediate the home as if they have that. So that's why you incorporated some of those wiping down, and we'll talk about.
So let me go through the different steps and make sense.
Let's do it.
So we have these super duper commercial vacuum cleaners, HEPA vacuum cleaners. So we go through and we will vacuum the area first.
That's step one. Step one.
Yeah. And when I say vacuum, we want to vacuum the walls, and we want to vacuum the floor. We want to vacuum, anything we can vacuum. We want to get underneath the refrigerator.
You guys were under my refrigerator.
We were. We're not going to tell people what we found under there either.
You were underneath my bed. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We lift the beds up. We lift everything up. You had some urns, those big terracotta urns, and we found stuff in there we cleaned out. I mean, it's surprising that, it's sort of like you're living there and you don't really think about these things, but we want to get, up on top of high shelves. We want to get on top of
light fixtures,
yes. We want to get everything, right? And then we also use the same stuff that we use for the fogging, the peracetic acid, and we damp cloths and we wipe everything down as well after we do the vacuuming. And at the same time we're doing that, we've got these big commercial scrubbing machines that we use, and they've got super high filters, what we call HEPA filters, and those are running the whole time because you're
kicking up stuff.
Exactly.
And you want them to get sucked in.
Right.
Now, at this phase, step one, that's when we also had our air ducts vacuumed.
We did.
Right? This is in step one.
Correct.
Let's talk about that.
That's part of that. Yeah. And so obviously, yeah. Okay. So what happens is when you have mold in any particular room, we kind of touched on earlier, there's always this argument I have with people. I just want you to remediate the bathroom. That's where the mold is. I'm going, look, you've got an air handling system. It's sucked in the spores from that mold because the mold survives by giving off spores. It's basically seeds that are being thrown out there.
That's how it survives.
Correct.
Right?
And just to throw in also, if you've put like Clorox bleach or anything like that on the mold, you've killed the mold, but that mold survives by spreading spores. So you just shot a gazillion of these spores into the air.
Okay, I'm going to put a little footnote in because I don't want to distract you from going through your steps, but bleach is not good when we're trying to actually get rid of mold. It can kill the mold, but the mold will then spore, which is what we don't want. So I think in talking with you before, you said, Johanna, if you see mold visibly, take hydrogen peroxide and use that because that's better, correct?
Yeah, and it's still going to do the same thing.
But it will do it less.
Well, hydrogen peroxide is less toxic than...
Yeah.
I always use hydrogen peroxide for everything now because it's really not toxic, whereas other stuff is. But it's still going to spore. Okay, so you still got to clean the air.
Got it. Okay, so...
And so those spores shoot out. You got it. Millions of these spores. If you look in my book, I got some really great pictures showing mold sporing, and it goes into the air. You don't see it; they're microscopic, and it gets sucked into the air handling system. As you know, air, your system is made to circulate air throughout the home, and that's what it does. And so that those and if you don't have a really, really good filtration system, a high-end filtration system, those spores are going to get sucked in and spread all through the home. And so you now have mold all over the place. Now, for an average person, and I kind of pick on guys because I really find women are far more sensitive to this than the guys. And I think it's two reasons. Women are more sensitive anyway. And also women tend to be home a lot more than the guys.
That makes sense.
The guys out running around. And a lot of people work from their homes now. So they're exposed to the
environment, whatever's in their
a lot longer. And anyway, so you now got those spores all over. And those spores may not affect the average person, but for people that are hypersensitive, it'll definitely affect them. And even a healthy person over time, it will affect them.
Get sick.
You know, a little bit of mold's not going to do anything, but over time it builds up and it compromises your system. And so all this kind of stuff is going on. And if you don't clean it up in the whole home, you know, and then we talked about the ducts. So we also have a company we work with and they specialize in cleaning out the ductwork. So they have a special machine. They have special air handling machines that will suck, you know, the air out of the system, and while they're cleaning, and then after they're done, then we fog the ductwork.
Yes, everything gets fogged.
Correct. So after we've done those initial 2 steps of the vacuuming and the wipe down, then we do the first fog.
Okay, so that's step 3.
Correct, and that will kill everything. And when we do it, we tell people, look, open the drawers, open your closets. We want it to get in everything, right? And and we have different fogging systems for different spots. You know, we're going to use a different fogging system for the crawl space because it's going to be a lot more mold down there probably than in your bedroom or whatever. And it depends how big the space is. But anyway, we have 3 or 4 different fogging machines depending on the type of room we're in. Anyway, in the end, we're going to do it really thoroughly. And when we do it, literally the fog is just everywhere. I mean, it's behind the books. It's, you know.
I saw the videos. It was pretty intense. It looked like a complete fog storm in the home.
Yeah, it is. And we let it sit in there and it kills off everything, right?
Now, how long did we do that? We were out of the home because we were on vacation, but I believe we didn't enter. It was at least 24-hour period.
Yeah, truthfully, in most cases, you can come back 6 or 8 hours later.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll smell
can,
vinegary.
Yeah, but people can live in their home. I guess that's also a question, right? When we're doing the remediation, can we stay in the home?
In most cases, you can. Now, if we're ripping walls open, and that's another thing, we try not to rip things apart because I know how people appreciate their homes. The last thing you want to do is rip a wall open. And there are a lot of companies out there that they just love ripping things apart. You know, it's like, oh, you got water underneath your sink. We have to pull all the cabinets out of your kitchen. You're like, no. Okay. Sometimes you do.
Sometimes
you know, like
you
I've
do.
been in hurricane situations where massive amount of water came in behind the walls and all that kitchen did have to be totally stripped down.
But that makes sense.
Right. But that's an unusual, most cases we just have to pull up underneath the sink or, you know, underneath the washing machine or whatever it is that had the problem. You don't have to do everything. So we try not to rip everything apart if we don't have to. Okay. But there are cases where we do. But anyway, the point is we remove all that. And then we do the different 5 steps we're talking about. So then the third step is the fogging. Okay. The fourth step is we come down and we wipe everything down again. Because what's happened is when you fogged, there's spores floating around. They've been killed and they're going to fall down and land on the surface. And so when we're fogging, truthfully, it doesn't take that long to fog. It's maybe 45 minutes and then the fog's done what it's going to do. And then after that, we come down and we wipe everything off again. So that's
step 4.
Yep.
The second wipe down.
Yep. And then step 5 is another fogging, but it's a totally different. It's actually based on, it's a silicate type of a chemical that seals the surface of everything and bonds on it so that when any mold or virtually any kind of microbiotic thing like virus, bacteria, whatever it is, lands on that surface, it gets killed. It automatically kills it.
And now, how long is that effective? That material, like where it can kill?
The EPA tested it for 90 days, and that's all they'll do. We're confident they'll last at least a year, or until it gets wet again.
Which makes sense. Because if something gets wet, then the barrier is compromised.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and it also depends on an area. Like if it's in a high touch area, they call it. You know, it's going to wear it down quicker, stuff like that. But it does last quite a while. We think it'll go for years and years if you don't.
So, for example, like a higher portion of the wall, maybe that's not getting traffic or nobody's touching it. That would last for years.
Exactly. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. So what I love about your philosophy, and again, I think when we had met, that appealed to me was you aren't interested in in just saying, let's just rip it out and rebuild.
Right.
For us, that was unrealistic because we have a custom home and it was a nightmare. And in fact, I think Matt at one point was in denial about how bad the mold problem was, because when the other two companies came, he was like, I'm not doing that. There's no way.
And I totally understand. Believe me, I've seen those quotes. and
and those are quotes just to remediate.
Right.
It doesn't include
the rebuild.
The rebuild, and it didn't include in our case any drainage. Not one of the other two companies had even mentioned fixing the source of the mold, which was drainage. Obviously, the second source was the original wood that came in to build the home, already had dry rot, but that's a one and done. I feel like you treat it, you encapsulate it, it's good. But we had this other bigger problem to address.
Yeah. And again, and that's kind of a specialty area. And again, it's way more common in California, or at least LA, than people realize. I mean, I'll give you another example. A friend of mine actually has a rental property in La Crescenta, and the tenant was complaining about mold and moisture. So I go over there, and the walls literally were wet, like damp.
Was it the inside of the wall? From what?
Well, that was the whole question. Like, I'm thinking, there's no leaks I can find or whatever. And then I realized they had a crawl space, and they were very similar to your situation, where there was a house about 3 feet elevation above them.
Next to them.
And when we went outside and checked, the water had come in. It was pooling up against the side of the house and was leaking into the... And then
it was coming up
and it was going into the crawl space. The crawl space had a couple inches of water in it. And all that moisture under the home was coming up through the floor and creating very high moisture inside the house.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so...
When was that? Was that recent?
That was like a year ago. There was a rains a year ago when they had that problem.
Oh, wow.
See, that's what we get really busy right after the rain in California. But it's a year-round problem most of the time. It just becomes more obvious.
I think so.
Rains.
I also want to talk about, because you mentioned this in your book, the differences between, I guess, homes that are being built now and how they were built before, how they're built for higher efficiency, right? So we have this focus on less energy, more efficient HVAC systems, and therefore the homes that are being built now are tighter. There's less ventilation, there's less airflow, and how just by nature of how homes are being built, we have to be even more aware of mold.
You do, and it's interesting because, in fact, I'll give you an example. There's a woman that called in, and this was actually in Florida, and they had moved into a brand new home in Florida. And 6 months later, she said, look, I've taken my husband, they were older, they were retired. I've taken my husband to ER 3 times since I've moved here.
Oh my goodness.
There's something going on here. And I've read about mold, et cetera. But our house is brand new. And so we went and checked it out. And again, it was, new high efficiency and everything seemed, because, you have better thermal pane windows and better insulation and all this kind of stuff, but it seals stuff in the house. And it turned out in their home, the ventilation system out of the bathroom, because you're supposed to have a vent that goes outside, wasn't done correctly.
Where was it venting to?
It didn't fully connect to the outside.
Oh, so it's still venting inside.
Exactly, which was creating moisture. And then they had mold in the attic, in the crawl space in the attic. I see,
as a result of that.
And I also believe, and we've talked about this, that I think a lot of problems are created by lumber sitting outside. And unless the wood's treated somehow...
Prior to the drywall and everything going up, this is inevitable.
Yeah, it is. And so what's the solution? Well, I mean, if you really want to do it right, and in Florida, we got opportunities to do it right because of the hurricane. I mean, there's homes that literally we had to strip right down to the studs, like literally strip everything out because they've been just saturated from the hurricane because the roof got ripped off or whatever. And in those cases, we scrubbed down all the beams and all the studs.
So whatever was left there, you were able to treat prior to rebuilding.
The framework was all there. Yeah. right? It's just we had to pull all the drywall out. And and then we encapsulated all those beams with a special paint that we use, which you got to clean the mold off first and treat the mold first.
That's what you
But then we spray it with this encapsulation, and that does two things. It seals it so that any mold that's embedded, because mold will grow deep into the wood, right? And so it'll seal it so the mold can't get out and new mold can't land on it and grow.
Got it.
And that's what we did in your basement, in your crawl space. We're in the process of doing it down there.
In the attic.
And we were proud that the job we did in your attic came out amazing. In fact,
it looks beautiful.
When we tested all three, because you have 3 separate attics, right?
Yep.
All 3 of them had 0 mold count.
Yes. And we're actually
zero, like nothing.
I know, which is insane. So we're going to we'll make sure that we put that on the video too, so people can see the results. I think, one thing, since we're talking about post-remediation testing,
right?
It's important maybe that we give more information to the viewers on what to look for. I think that's important because, testing after all of this remediation is done is so important for peace of mind, especially for us. Sure. And could you talk a little bit more about what we're looking for, how we're testing, so that we can see whether or not the remediation was effective?
Sure. And again, in Florida, by law, you have to.
Yeah.
Like if it's an insurance job or whatever, you have to have a third party come in and test. Mm-hmm. In California, there's no requirement.
That's just so crazy to me.
It is, but again, it's like anything. Somebody's got to fund it and feel that it's important.
Yeah.
And it's just not an obvious thing here, but it's anyway. So we always have it tested afterwards. And so when you're we obviously want to test the same areas that you had tested before.
Correct. That was when we had discovered the initial mold.
Correct.
So we're going back to those spaces. And then I think the control, you explained to me, right? You would take a sample from outside and then compare that to the air quality inside.
Yes. And that brings up a really good point. So what's the correct level of mold that's acceptable? And the only benchmark in the remediation community that's come out is how is the level of mold outside your home compared to the level inside?
I guess that makes the most sense. Yeah, because mold is everywhere. We can't have a mold-free environment. It doesn't exist.
Exactly. So no matter how good we remediate, you're going to open a door and the kids go running in and out, or the kids come in with muddy feet or whatever, and you're going to have mold in your home again. And so the benchmark is if you have X amount of mold count outside your home, we got to make sure it's equal or less to that in the house, right? And if we do a really good job, it'll be a lot less. And if we do proper measures after we've done our job, and you keep the house clean and you keep good filters in your HVAC system and you make sure the kids aren't running around with mud on their feet all through the house or whatever, then you'll keep it
I think
low.
I need to do a better job of that, of making
good luck
sure
with
they
that. I understand.
But you actually just touched on something I also want to talk about, which is when we were talking about the remediation for our home, you had put this special UV light onto all of the HVAC systems. Let's talk a little bit about that and what that piece of equipment does.
Yeah. And again, look, when we're talking about mold remediation and stuff, it's somewhere between an art and science. It's an emerging world, and I know in your other video or the other podcast I listened to with, We Inspect, you got talking about functional medicine and stuff. So, it's important to have your body functioning really well to fight off any kind of mold or illness or whatever. And you've got to deal whatever you can to clean the mold up in the home. And you've also got to keep the mold out of the home as much as possible. Right. And so there's a lot of different technologies. There's a lot of different theories. It seems like every 6 months, something comes
new
up.
Is coming
exactly.
up.
And so I can't attest to, things being perfect in this world yet. But it's emerging quite a bit. So a man that I know who developed a technology, and look, if you look up UV lights, there's all kinds of different ones. Now, UV lights are used, I think you're familiar with EBU, right?
Correct.
And they use EBU light to kills off viruses.
That's right.
And so it's good for killing things. It's somewhat limited, though, when you're doing it with it in air going through a HVAC system. Mm-hmm. So a man I know actually developed a technology, and he's a big fan of the fogging and the hydrogen peroxide that we talked about. So he developed a system where it's a probe you put into the HVAC system, and the UV light activates the metal. There's like a honeycomb metal in it. And the way it actually works is the UV light is just there to activate the metal, and the metal creates what they call hydrogen peroxide plasma, or energized hydrogen peroxide. And that energized hydrogen peroxide will now circulate through the HVAC system and go through all your own home. And the system's proven to be so effective that it's now, he's making a killing doing food processing plants, because the standards in food processing plants, because of salmonella and everything else, are super high. I mean, they get inspected all the time. And if you flunk that, they shut your plant down. So he's gotten really well known in that industry, and they use them for that a lot.
Oh, wow.
And so that's how effective it is. So it's just now being introduced to do in homes. It's pretty new technology, so you're probably not going to see it around much. But anyway, so we've started using it, and I got it in my own home, and we love it. Now, when you're using it, you got to keep the air circulating so that it's constantly creating this hydrogen peroxide plasma. But you don't smell it. It's very slight, but it's enough that it's going to, kill off mold and other viruses and things in your home.
So I loved that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it now that we've been using it and seeing how it works. And so there are technologies like that available. And it comes down to the other thing, we've been going through all these different things you can do for your home, and it's somewhere between art and science. What was great about you when you first called, I thought, oh, this is a tough one, man. You were grilling me hard.
I actually was, because I had those two other companies that I just felt very skeptical with and not aligned with.
And I was sitting there at first going, oh man, this is going to be a really...
You're probably like, oh, she's going to be tougher than my wife.
Exactly. I thought, I don't know about this one. But then when we got talking, I realized, you know what? She's got educated, and she just really cares. She wants it done correctly. You want to do the right thing, and it's got to be reasonable. And I pretty sure I explained to you, look, we got to spend some time working together, because every home's different. Every situation's different. I run into a lot of different things. There's no way I can just give you, a canned system of doing things. We got to sit down and work it out. And we may do a bunch of things and it still didn't all work. We need to do some more. Or, you know what I mean?
I think, I love that, because you did set the expectation. We were very, you were very transparent, and because of the undertaking and the type of project that this turned out to be, I felt you guys did a great job of managing our expectations and being very transparent and being very honest and saying, listen, Johanna, I think this amount of work might be enough. Let's see how you feel after that. If you want to do more, we can go back to the report and do it in stages. And that was something I could manage. I felt it was manageable. One of the things I also did ask you, because I love the fogging system, like the home smelled just like it would outside right after the rain.
Right.
It smelled very clean and sanitized. Remember, I said to you, how often would you recommend that we do a fogging? Because I feel like that's for, talking about maintenance and keeping your environment clean, and it's not an exact science, just top of mind. Every how many years would you recommend a possible fogging, just to keep things on the up and up?
Well, especially if there's somebody that's mold sensitive in the home. I mean, there's some people have us do it every year. Now look, in your case, we went the extra mile, and that was one wonderful thing. After I got off the phone with you the first time, I thought, here's someone that really wants to do all the right stuff. And unfortunately, economics is a big part of this. And, we do a lot of work for property owners, like rental properties. And obviously they want to do the minimal amount because they
have a budget and
they want to do
business.
the right thing, but they want to keep it, and it's disappointing a lot, because I'm like, we really need to do all these other things, but and the client just doesn't want to pay for it, or they can't afford it, or whatever the situation is. In your situation, you're like, look, we really want to do the right thing here. Let's really figure out all the things that can be done. And that's wonderful for both of us. Anyway, so as far as the fogging, now in your case, you've done all the right things here. So maybe every couple of years should be fine. Now some people, they're not going to go all the extra mile and do all the different things that you've done here. And they should probably follow. Like there's one job that a friend of mine's a chiropractor, and they're in an office. And unfortunately, the owner of the building just is not, they won't spend the money to deal with roofing issues and whatever. I think they should get fogged every 3 months
because at least they're able to have some type of, benefit.
Correct. Because we're never going to get the mold effectively remediated there just because the building owner won't do it. But if we fog the place every 3 or 4 months or something, that it'll keep it at a low level and it should be fine. So,
wow. This was a really amazing and informative episode. I just have one more question.
Sure.
What would you tell homeowners that are listening to this, that are now realizing I have mold in my home? Any words of encouragement, any words of advice? What is the one takeaway you would give them?
Yeah, well, my stepdaughter had this quote on her door, a sticker for years. And I always remember that. It said, life is tough, but it's even tougher when you're stupid.
That's so true.
And the point is you got to get educated. You have to understand what you're dealing with. And so that was really, I tried to make, and again, when you're dealing with mold, it's an emerging thing. There's as far as how you deal with it. And it's now becoming much more of a conversation.
It is. It is.
But 5-10 years ago, you didn't really hear about it. So anyway, there's a lot of different opinions on how to do it. So I wrote this book trying to get people to understand what it takes and why you do it and all the things you can do that make sense. But it comes down to common sense, And so everybody needs to spend some time understanding what they're dealing with. Guys need to understand that it may not be affecting them so much, but the wife have a problem, or their daughter or granddaughter or whatever it is. And it's pretty common to have somebody in the family having some kind of immune sensitivity, and the other family members have to understand that, and they have to, be effective in dealing with it. So it's not a perfect science, in my opinion. And like we talked about, there's a lot of different technologies and a lot of things you can do. But again, you have to get educated and take your own responsibility. And again, we can do all the remediation we want, but if you don't follow through and make sure you change your filters every 3 or 6 months, if you don't keep the house clean, if you don't make sure that things get aired out and dried out quickly when there's water spilled or there's some kind of leak, you have to take responsibility for all those kind of things to keep your environment from becoming a problem.
I think that's great. And I think for me, if I could say one thing to my viewers that are going through trying to find a remediation company, it would be, I know this is emotional. I know that you want to get things fixed right away, but don't rush so much so unless you find the right company. Because in hindsight, I could have gone with any one of the other 2 companies and would have still, I truly believe, found myself in the same place years later.
Right. Well, we appreciate that you picked us. And
of course.
And it's been fun working with you, and it's been a great project for us. When you're working with someone who understands, and it's a great job, because in the end, we've made it healthier for everybody.
100%.
And that's the goal.
100%. So Rusty, for those viewers that are watching this, where can they find you online and your book? If
you Google Mold Zero, now we have 2 websites, one for California here in LA, and the other one is for the Tampa Bay area. So the one here in LA is moldzerollc.com.
Mm-hmm. And the one in Florida is what?
It's just moldzero.com. But if you just put in Mold Zero, our website here will come up.
Okay, great.
And then the book I'm just about to launch, so we will have a link on the
website.
On the website, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, and we can send out electronic versions of it. But
I think that's wonderful.
I literally just finished the book, and I'm just refining it a little bit, and we're just getting a publisher and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to have that go out. But again, it comes down to education. People need to understand what they're dealing with and what works and what doesn't, and be willing to do what it takes to fix it if there's a problem.
100%. Well, Rusty, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed this.
Great. I did too.
Great.
All right. Thanks, Johanna.
This podcast is sponsored and brought to you by One Body Medicine. You can learn more by visiting onebodymedicine.com. That's the number 1, bodymedicine.com. You can also follow the show on social media under the handle Pure Wellness Pod. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.